Good morning, everyone. It's May 19th, 2023. I hope everyone's well. And today I'm going to do something a little different. Over the years, having been married to a police officer, people have asked me this particular question, and I've tried to answer it to the best I could, but I think I'm going to try and give it maybe a little bit more insight into what may be going on with some of our officers today. Well, number one, I think our former officers years ago had a little more patience. I think that was a big one too. But what I want to do is I'm going to start with a story of what happened to me while being my first husband's fiance. Now, he'd bought a puppy. It was a standard poodle. He was 10 months old when this incident occurred. I had, since he'd been on the beat, and I used to sneak on the beat with him. I used to walk with him, and sometimes I'd take the dog for a walk to give the dog some exercise too. And if anyone knows Ottawa at all, they will know Somerset West quite well, and Booth Street and Preston Street. And of course, they'll know that long hill from Booth Street right down to Preston Street. Well, this particular day, I had stopped at the top of the hill. Something caught my attention in the window at the store, so I'm looking at it. Next thing I know, the dog is just about pulling my arm out of my socket. He just jumped so hard I had to let him go. Next thing I know, he's running down the hill as fast as he can. He's gaining speed. And then when I looked at the bottom of the hill, I go, oh no, there's a police officer in full uniform standing at the bottom of the hill. And I'm sure he thought it was his master. So I started running after him as fast as I could down the hill. And he's standing at the lights. The lights are about to change. I hear a couple of horns honk because a couple of people saw the dog coming at him. And of course, he had his back turned to us, so he didn't see us or see the dog coming full speed down the hill. So the next thing I know, as I get down there towards the bottom of the hill, the dog has jumped up on his back and thrown him right face first into a mud puddle, right off the curb onto the street. By the time I got down there, the poor dog is sniffing up and down and in his gray coat, trying to figure out, well, where's my master? You know, you've got to be in here somewhere. This is a uniform. And he's trying to pick himself up off the street. By the time he gets picked up off the street, I'm down at the bottom of the hill. And he says, what is the matter with your dog? And I said, well, he's not my dog. Oh, he's got to be your dog. You're responsible for your dog. And I said, well, he's not my dog. I'm sorry, he's mistaken you for someone else. And he says, well, what do you mean mistaken me for someone else? I'm engaged to be married to one of your police officers, and he believes that you're his master. And of course, he just looked at me and he said, lady, I've heard a lot of excuses in my life, but this is one of the best I've ever heard. Right. His master's a police officer. Yeah, right. And he was so furious at me. And, when he started giving me the riot act, and then he was so upset, he just walked off in a huff. Nothing seriously happened at that point. So he walked off in a huff. And then as I gathered myself together, I looked over, and the poor people in the car, the poor gentleman driving the car, he was like frozen to the steering wheel. And all he kept saying was, I almost ran over a police officer. I almost ran over a police officer. And so he's sounding like a broken record. A couple of guys came over, gave us a hand. And he was so frozen to the wheel, and his wife was in the passenger seat. So they eventually asked the wife to go in the back seat. And one of them said, well, you drive my car home. I'll just drive his car home. And they just kind of pushed him over to the passenger seat. So they got him home safely. So thankfully, nobody was hurt in the incident. But boy, did I hear about it when I got the dog back home later. My fiance comes in, says, what the heck happened today? I heard all from the station that Jason flattened somebody, one of our officers on the street, and he thought it was me. What are you talking about? What happened? So I explained what happened, just as I explained to you on the video, and that he had mistaken the uniform, that you were in the uniform. And he said, well, that's ridiculous. How could that be? And I said, well, it's the same thing. When I looked down the hill, all I saw was a uniform. I couldn't tell if it was you or not. And of course, the dog certainly couldn't tell it was you. So the only way he could find out if it was you or not, it was through his sniffer. So of course he's sniffing through the uniform looking for you in that uniform. So you can't really blame the dog. So what had ended up happening was he found out that the poor officer was so upset. He'd gone to another officer on the beat and told him what happened. The other officer, of course, started to laugh at him and said, "She was telling you the truth. She is going to marry one of our constables, so and so." And he just apparently, from what I understand, from what my husband said, or my fiance said when he got back home, I should say, was that his face went as red as his hair. So it was a big funny thing going around the station at the time, and it was a clear-cut case of mistaken identity. But he didn't want to believe me. I was lying. Oh no, I had to be making up excuses, and this is one of the best he'd ever heard. So this was one of the things that I did want to bring in about sometimes even police officers are mistaken, and they believe you are lying, and sometimes it really backfires, and sometimes it's funny. Hopefully it doesn't end up in anyone getting hurt. Unfortunately, nobody got hurt in this incident. But it comes back to what I wanted to talk a little bit about was my grandfather used to always tell me something. Think before you act. No, just think about it. Think before you act. What's happening, I think, today is we're just reacting to situations rather than thinking before we act. So this is one of the things that I think our police officers are doing and not thinking through, maybe. I realize that when our emergency services, such as our firemen and our paramedics, as well as our police, sometimes there's only split seconds to make decisions. But if you have the chance, before you do something, think about it. Okay, before you react. And then this is what's happening. This reaction is we're having such a growing population. There's so many of us. It's not like the old days when we could just kind of lay back and think about things. Our whole society is speeding up with our technology and everything else, that we're not starting to use our brains perhaps in a way that we should be using them. And plus the fact, a lot of people today with our society are mistrusting people. For example, with the situation with the gossip that I've handled a little bit, people don't trust each other like they used to. They don't know their next door neighbor. They don't know their office people. They don't know their employees the way they should. So this is another thing that I'm seeing today. And, sometimes we have a problem where we really need to question our own judgment on things. It's not easy in certain circumstances, but maybe we need to take a step back sometimes when it doesn't seem to be too serious a situation before we are jumping to conclusions. And that's what we seem to be doing very quickly these days, is jumping to conclusions. Just because a person is a certain color or a certain, not just color, but people who are maybe mentally ill, we don't know that they're mentally ill, but maybe we need to take a step back and find out what's really the problem before we react to that. And then the other thing I find today is when I was growing up, it wasn't what the police are doing. It was sort of what the police were doing. But back then, because everybody trusted everybody else in those days, I've had people used to come up and say, "Why are the police asking so many questions? Are they ever being nosy? They've got their nose stuck in everybody's business." Well, it seemed to be the opposite problem back then. But when they always talked and questioned us, that was a big thing. They used to question us a lot more before they just jumped into action. If we can go back to that way and find situations where we can question, then we wouldn't have so many different problems that we have today. And so it's very difficult. So it's very layered. It's a lot of what society has done today. I know myself, if I was walking on the beach and I found a bottle and I could rub it and a genie had come out, I think that would be the first wish I would want, is do something with our society. Put our society back together, and so that we can all live in peace. I wouldn't want anything for myself. I think myself, because that would satisfy myself, is for everybody to at peace and be able to walk down the street, take care of one another in a really, really good way. And I think that's about what I have to say for today, but there's still a lot that I'm trying to put out and say and not make too long videos, but sometimes it's almost impossible because there is so much to say. But I do believe that good people getting together like I'm doing is very, very good, and I think we're trying to think before we act. And people need to realize that when the community gets together, we're trying to put our heads together and we're trying to think, how can we help our society? How can we help our communities here? Can we go back and in a good way and at the same time go forward? Because we really need to go back, take a look at what we did in the past, and if it's really good, then can we implement this into the future as well? So this is what I have to say today, and I hope everyone has a good day. And it's a beautiful day out today, and we shall talk again soon. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye. Take care.